There is a specific patch of dirt in the Middle East, roughly 37 acres in size, that acts as the geopolitical fuse of the entire planet. If you light a match here, you don't just start a fire, you ignite the world. We are talking about the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. To the secular eye, it is just a stone platform in a hot, dusty city. But for billions, literally billions of human beings, this is the center of the universe. It is the coordinates where the physical world touches the divine. And right now, there is a movement, quiet but relentless, to build a structure on top of it that hasn't stood for 2,000 years. The Third Temple. This isn't just an architectural project. This isn't a museum. The blueprints for this building are drafted in ancient prophecy, and the mortar is mixed with modern politics. For some, laying the first stone is the ultimate act of hope, the key to unlocking an age of global peace and the arrival of the Messiah. For others, it is the terrifying prerequisite for the apocalypse, the stage that must be set for the Antichrist to rise and for the world to end in fire. And for over 1 billion others, the very idea of this construction is a declaration of war, an assault on one of their holiest sanctuaries that must be defended with blood. We need to talk about why a single building has the power to dictate the future of humanity. We need to understand why, for 3 major religions, the clock is ticking down to the moment construction begins. This is the story of the Third Temple. To understand the obsession with the Third Temple, you have to understand the absolute devastation of losing the first 2. You have to feel the phantom limb syndrome of an entire nation. The story doesn't begin with politics. It begins 3,000 years ago with a king named David and a box covered in gold. David united the tribes of Israel, but he knew a kingdom needed a heart. He wanted to build a house for the Ark of the Covenant, that terrifying holy chest containing the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments. This wasn't just a relic. It was the footstool of God on earth. David wasn't allowed to build it, so the task fell to his son, Solomon. Solomon's temple was not a church. It was a machine for holiness. Built from massive Lebanese cedars and overlaid with so much gold it blinded you in the sun, it was designed for one specific purpose: to house the presence of God, the Shekinah. Deep inside was the Holy of Holies, a room of absolute silence and darkness where the Ark sat. Once a year, on Yom Kippur, the high priest would enter. If he wasn't spiritually pure, it was believed he would die instantly. That is the level of voltage we are talking about. For 4 centuries, this was the anchor of the Jewish soul. It was the only place on earth where the rift between God and man could be bridged through sacrifice. And then, in 587 BCE, the Babylonians came. They didn't just conquer the city, they severed the artery. They burned the temple. They leveled the stone. The Ark of the Covenant vanished into the mist of history, never to be seen again. The psychological trauma of this moment is hard for us to grasp today. Imagine if someone erased not just your capital city, but your direct phone line to the Creator. 70 years later, they returned. They built a second temple. It stood for 500 years, renovated by King Herod into one of the most magnificent structures of the ancient world. This was the temple Jesus walked through. This was the temple that stunned the Roman world. But in the year 70 CE, the nightmare repeated itself. The Roman legions, led by Titus, besieged Jerusalem. After months of starvation, they breached the walls. They slaughtered the population and set the second temple ablaze. The gold melted into the cracks of the stones, so the soldiers pried the rocks apart to get it, literally leaving not one stone upon another. For 2,000 years, the Jewish people have been wandering in a spiritual wilderness. They pray facing Jerusalem. They break a glass at their weddings to remember the destruction. They finish their Passover meals with the desperate whisper, "Next year in Jerusalem." All that remains today is the Western Wall, a mere retaining wall of the outer complex. It is a place of tears. But for a growing number of people, the time for tears is over. The time for concrete and stone has arrived. This brings us to the first vision of the future, the Jewish perspective. For Orthodox Judaism, the Third Temple is not a nice-to-have. It is a must-have. It is the missing piece of the human experience. You have to understand that Judaism is a religion of action. Of the 613 commandments in the Torah, over 200 of them, 1/3, cannot be performed without a standing temple. The sacrifices, the agricultural tithes, the priestly duties, they are all currently paused, suspended in animation. Without the temple, the faith is, in their eyes, operating at partial capacity. But it goes deeper than rituals. The prophets Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Zechariah spoke of a messianic age. They described a time when a descendant of David would restore the kingdom and a third temple would rise, not just for Jews, but as a house of prayer for all nations. Ezekiel actually gives a guided tour of this future building. He measures the walls. He describes the gates. He describes the return of the Shekinah, the glory of God filling the house, never to leave again. For centuries, this was viewed as something God would do in His own time. You wait. You pray. God builds. But in the last few decades, a radical shift has occurred. A philosophy of active redemption has taken hold. Groups like the Temple Institute in the old city of Jerusalem aren't waiting for a temple to descend from the clouds. They are building it piece by piece, right now. If you visit them, you won't see diagrams. You will see the actual vessels. They have recreated the golden menorah, crafted from a single block of solid gold. They have woven the uniforms for the priests using the specific crimson and blue dyes mentioned in the Bible. They have reconstructed the high priest's breastplate with the 12 precious stones. They are training young men, descendants of the priestly line, in exactly how to butcher the sacrifices and swing the incense. They are not role-playing. They are packing their bags for a move they believe is imminent. And then there is the matter of the cow, the red heifer. Sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, but it is dead serious. The Book of Numbers states that to purify a priest who has been in contact with death, which, in the modern world, is everyone, you need the ashes of a perfectly red heifer. No white hairs, no black hairs, never worked a day in its life. Without this ash, you cannot have a kosher temple service. For nearly 2 millennia, a qualified cow did not exist. It was a biological impossibility. Until now. In recent years, red heifers have been bred in Texas and airlifted to Israel. As of late 2020, there are heifers in secure locations in the West Bank that are being monitored 24/7. They are approaching the age where they can be sacrificed. To the believers, this isn't agriculture. It is a flashing neon sign from heaven that the waiting room is closed and the main event is about to begin. But while the Jewish believers see a dawn of redemption, millions of Christians look at the exact same blueprints and see the sun setting on the world. For evangelical Christians, the third temple is a paradox. It is a building they believe must be built, but it is a building that is doomed to be desecrated. Their timeline of the future is drawn from the book of Daniel, the words of Jesus, and the terrifying visions of Revelation. They believe that we are approaching the end times. The narrative goes like this. The church will be removed from the earth. Then, a charismatic global leader will rise out of the chaos. He will be a peacemaker. He will do the impossible. He will broker a treaty in the Middle East that allows the Jewish people to rebuild their temple on the mount. But it's a trap. This leader is the Antichrist. The Apostle Paul warned of a man of lawlessness who will oppose everything that is called God. Paul writes that this figure will set himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. Jesus called this the abomination of desolation. The Christian view envisions a 7-year period of tribulation. In the first half, the temple is built and sacrifices resume. It looks like peace, but at the halfway mark, the mask comes off. The Antichrist walks into the Holy of Holies, stops the sacrifices, and demands worship for himself. This triggers the Great Tribulation, the bowls of wrath, the 4 horsemen, the final persecution. So, when Christians read about the Temple Institute weaving robes or the red heifers landing at Ben Gurion Airport, they don't feel joy. They feel a shiver down their spine. They interpret these news headlines as the sound of the prophetic clock ticking its final seconds. They support the temple's construction not because they want to worship there, but because its construction is the necessary trigger for the return of Jesus to destroy the Antichrist and establish his own kingdom. But there is a massive, immovable obstacle standing in the way of both these visions. And that brings us to the third perspective: Islam. If you look at the Temple Mount today, you don't see ruins, you see gold. You see the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. For Muslims, this site is the Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary. It is the third holiest site in Islam. Its sanctity is tied to the miraculous. Muslims believe that on one sacred night, the angel Gabriel transported the Prophet Muhammad from Mecca to this very spot in Jerusalem. From the rock that sits beneath the Golden Dome, Muhammad ascended the ladder of heaven, meeting the prophets who came before him: Moses, Elijah, Jesus, and standing before the presence of Allah to receive the command for prayer. For 1,300 years, this has been an Islamic site. The Dome of the Rock is a masterpiece of geometry and faith, a proclamation of monotheism. To the Muslim world, the idea of a Jewish temple here isn't a return. It is an invasion. It is a conspiracy to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is a red line that cannot be crossed. Throughout the Islamic world, the slogan, Al-Aqsa is in danger, is a rallying cry that brings millions to the streets. They view the Jewish presence on the Mount not as prayer, but as a prelude to demolition. And they too have end times prophecies. Many traditions speak of the return of Isa, Jesus, to Damascus and then Jerusalem to fight the Dajjal, the deceiver. Defending the sanctuary is a spiritual duty. Any attempt to harm these mosques, or even the perception of a threat, is enough to trigger a holy war. We aren't talking about diplomatic sanctions. We are talking about a conflict that would engulf the Middle East and likely drag the rest of the world down with it. So here we stand. Section 5. The collision. We have 3 distinct maps of the future, but they all try to occupy the same 37 acres of reality. The tension is no longer theoretical. It is palpable. You can feel it in the air. Israeli politicians are now openly visiting the Mount, claiming sovereignty, breaking the decades-old status quo that prohibited Jewish prayer there. The Temple Institute is moving from research to rehearsal. The heifers are chewing their cud in the West Bank. Meanwhile, the Christian world watches with bated breath, checkbooks open, funding the preparations, waiting for the rapture. And the Muslim world watches with deep suspicion, ready to defend the noble sanctuary at any cost. The fuse is short. The match is lit. The question is, what happens next? Is the Third Temple a divine inevitability, a glorious restoration that cannot be stopped? Is it a dark omen of the end of history? Or is it a man-made catastrophe, a self-fulfilling prophecy that will drown the region in blood? We are watching history collapse into prophecy in real time. And the scariest part? Everyone thinks they are the hero of the story. What do you think will happen? Is the construction of the Third Temple inevitable in our lifetime? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to understand the forces shaping our world, make sure you're subscribed.